Okay, so do you want to say the question first, and then I'll do an overview while they type?
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out exactly how we want to word the question. I think what you said
Mhm.
last time was like, how has this study changed you?
Yeah, something like that. What have you learned? What's your takeaway?
Yeah.
How are you different?
So I'll be dropping that in the chat, and feel free, even as kind of we go throughout, we're gonna just kind of briefly touch on some of the things that we covered in class. So just all throughout this time, feel free to drop in takeaways and things that stood out to you, and things that hopefully you can take with you as we move forward.
Yeah. So, well, Adam's typing that, and I'll just add one other thing onto what he's saying. You know, the whole point of Bible study is to be changed by it, to know God more, and to be changed and to live better for the Lord because we know Him better. That's the whole point. And so, really, what this class is about is I don't think we're probably going to, I don't intend to learn anything new today. This is just, 14 weeks of study. I would like to know, what have you learned? How are you different? Um, it's not even about this class. Good night. We've done COVID and now like international unrest. We've studied rest for 13. Maybe we broke the world.
I don't know.
I never considered that we might be responsible for that. But yeah, this class started with I wanted to make some material to talk to teenagers at camp, to deal with teenagers about teenager stuff, stress and anxiety and suicide and all of that. And so that's where the idea started. And then we went to COVID, and now we've ended up in the world that we're in right now. I saved a headline from yesterday in the AP News. Americans, this is a poll, Americans are the unhappiest that they've been in 50 years. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's what this whole class has been about. What are we going to do about this? And so we talked about a survey of the scripture. We talked about Genesis 2 in almost every class, and God's intent for humanity to rest and to be with man in unhindered fellowship, perfect fellowship in the presence of God. We talked about the problem and sin and how we messed that up, and now we're cast away from the presence of God, and all of the struggles, death, separation, toil, all of that is a result. Things that I was praying about, it's almost, I always feel bad when I say this. I probably need to find a new way to say it because it feels very irreverent to me. But it seems like I described this with Lily especially. I said, don't be a silly, pathetic girl. And what I mean when I say don't be a silly, pathetic girl is don't be one of these girls who chases after a boy, and even though that boy treats you like dirt and puts you down and ignores you and all that, these girls, they just chase and chase and chase and chase and chase. I'm like, don't put up with that nonsense. And I don't at all want to call God a silly, pathetic girl. But it seems like, look at all of the mistakes that we make throughout history and in our own lives, and He just chases us and chases us and chases us, opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. The Sabbath day, the Sabbath year, the Jubilee, His presence in the tabernacle, that didn't work. His presence in the temple, that didn't work. His presence in the temple again, that didn't work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like again and again and again and again. And so that's what we've been doing in this class, is just talking about being in the presence of God and resting in His fellowship, unhindered from the burdens of life. Got anything coming? I saw you laughing over there.
Oh, earlier Chad commented that we should hug. I guess our bromance was getting a little intense, maybe.
No, that will not be happening, Chad, because distance, social distance.
Yes. But we do that, as great as that comment was, which was excellent. We do really want to see your comments as well on takeaways, because we've kind of built this class to have a little bit more space in it, and so chime in the comments, and anything that stood out to you that you want to take away, let us know. One of the things that I was starting to think about was actually kind of triggered from something that Dave said around the Lord's table on Sunday, that I think just the way he said it sort of stood out to me, that God created man for fellowship with Him, which I think we said something similar, but I just hadn't quite thought of it in that way. Like the whole reason we're created was so that we can enjoy being with God and he can enjoy being with us.
Yeah.
And then you trace that story throughout the Bible of how many times God does try to set up either, a time and a space for rest like the Sabbath, or a place that we come together with God like the tabernacle, the temple, and how much man just kind of says no, or defiles it, or says, oh, it's such a burden. And then he sends his own son to tabernacle with us, and he's rejected. And it is a story of his constant pursuit. And, can we finally learn to take him and accept him and be with him the way that he wants?
Yeah. That's good stuff. You said tabernacled with him. The John 1:14 verses, and he came and dwelt among us again. But this time in the actual person of God. Like, no more temple cut off by the walls, no more Sabbath. We're going to do this one day a week. He came and lived among us.
Mm-hmm.
And all for the hope and the promise of dwelling with God. It's awesome. So I've got two things on here. If there's I don't know, if I would like to devote most of our attention to the comments as they come in.
Mm-hmm.
But do you want to, you just said one of the things you were thinking of. Do you want to talk about how you're different or changed, or you want me to do mine? How do you want to do this?
You can start.
Okay. And also, Erica and Becky, if you guys want to chime in too, this would be an okay time. We're asking for feedback here. Here's mine. And it's kind of a long and annoying one. Adam's like, yeah, I was harassing Adam about this. In the book Les Miserables, you don't need to send me a text message and tell me that I'm pronouncing it wrong. I will never say Les Miserables. It will always be Les Miserables. There is, in the first book, book is divided into separate books. In the very first book, there is a character that the whole first section of the book is devoted to, Bishop Muriel. And he is just awesome. And I was talking about this at dinner with everybody. I promise there's a point, and I'll try and get to the point eventually. But we were talking about this at dinner. This is what makes a book a classic. You don't just read a book and say, oh, hey, that was a pretty good story. I like that. The classics are the ones that really affect you and make you want to change and be different. And so this guy, Bishop Muriel, I want to be like this guy. And in these last 13 weeks of talking about God's rest, I think that's the defining characteristic of him and what I want for my own life. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down a couple quotes here. I'll read these because it matters. So this guy in Les Miserables, this bishop, he was born into a noble family. He was living a normal life like everybody else in the world. During the French Revolution, he went to Italy as an exile, and his wife died. And that brings us to this. Was he, in the midst of these distractions, these affections which absorbed his life, was he suddenly smitten with one of those mysterious and terrible blows which sometimes overwhelm, by striking to his heart, a man whom public catastrophes would not shake, by striking at his existence and his fortune? No one could have told. All that was known was that when he returned from Italy, he was a priest. And the reason why I'm drawn to that quote is because he was living in a time of national unrest, the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. He was living as an exile away from his home. His wife died. And it was those circumstances that caused him to become the awesome character that he is in the book. Mm-hmm. And incidentally, it's that influence that he has on the main character of the book that causes that main character to turn from a terrible person into a man of peace and helpful and loving and all of this stuff. And so all of that just to say That's what I want to be. Like, that to me is a picture of this class. And I wrote down this Philippians 4 and verses 5 through 7. This is all that we're talking about. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. To constantly be a person who is at rest in the Lord, no matter what your physical circumstances are. To always be a person who loves others and treats others kindly, no matter what their response is to you. The moral of the story is, when we talk about God's rest, Bishop Muriel is the picture for me, and I want to be that.
And really, part of what you're saying, I think, is that if his life had stayed on the comfortable, easy kind of track that it was on, it probably never would have pushed him in this direction.
Yeah.
When he kind of lost everything, he had to reckon with himself, who am I? What am I going to be after all of this?
Yeah. And that's what brings me to this conversation right now, is to say, COVID, national unrest, all of this stuff. What is our response going to be? And I'll tell you, I feel like I've failed an awful lot because I've been stressed and anxious and all of this stuff. And what I want to do is I want to say, here are my circumstances. I'm going to be better because of it. I want to be more at home in God's rest. Yeah. That's my number one big takeaway. I got two. That's my number one.
Yeah, and that's a good time to share something that Tim Hill said about his takeaway. And feel free to drop yours in as well. But Tim said, I've once again witnessed that even despite our circumstances and the national mess we're in, God's word still gets through if we choose to listen to him.
Sure enough.
It's really about where we focus our attention. But that gets hard when there are so many things fighting for it, and it just seems like there is just bad news and on every corner, and just like learning to find the peace that God has to offer. Sometimes it's just literally just kind of the noise of the world that will drown that out for us sometimes.
So would you read Tim's comment again, please?
Yeah.
I want to tell you what I thought of with that.
Yeah. Despite our circumstances and the national mess we're in, God's word still gets through if we choose to listen to him.
Okay. So in Matthew 16, this is where Peter makes his great confession. Jesus says, who do people say that I am? And they go through the whole thing. And Jesus finishes in verse 18. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I don't know what I've always thought about that, but something hit me within the last year. I don't remember when it was. I don't remember. I always say the other day. When I say the other day, that could be like anything up to 5 years ago when I say that. So the other day, something hit me. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. What is a gate?
Entrance.
Yeah, especially if you think about a city. A gate is a defensive tool. I've always, for whatever reason, my picture of this verse in Matthew 16 is that the armies of hell are not going to overcome Jesus as the Christ.
Yeah.
That's not what it's saying. It says the gates of hell. A gate is a defensive tool. We're locked up here away from God and away from the world, and Jesus is banging down the gates, and he says the gates are not going to prevail over the fact that Jesus is the Christ. And that is what Tim is talking about. No matter what nonsense our world creates and builds up, the Word of God, man, is breaking that stuff down. It's not going to stop the truth that Jesus is Christ and what he came to do. Anyway, I always say that. Tim, thank you for reminding me of that. I've been thinking of that some lately.
It's a good one.
Any other? Nobody's making any comments. I need you to make comments tonight, or you're just gonna have to listen to me.
They want to hear us? I guess. That can't be it. Maybe comments aren't working or something. I'll share one of mine here.
Okay.
And it's actually similar sort of to what we've been talking about, but the thing that I jotted down and have been trying to reflect on for these, especially lately, as we're starting to get a little bit more normalcy in life, and it seems like, yes, we're going to have to deal with a lot of these things for a long time, but some parts of life, some rhythms of life may be starting to come back. But reflecting on all that it's been, I wrote, in moments of darkness and stress and turmoil, we as God's people ought to be shining the brightest. But often it's so easy to just turn inward and be filled with worry and anxiousness and just kind of hunker down. And so as I'm trying to think about like the next time, whatever the next time is, and it may just be something just for me, you know, it doesn't have to be something that's cutting across all society, but the next time I want to do better about really letting my gentle spirit be known to others, you know, and not just like closing down the doors and trying to make sure that I survive, but it's really when things are at their darkest, there's such an opportunity for us to be out there talking about and living peace and joy and hope. And instead, it's so easy to let that anxiousness eat us up inside, and we turn on each other, and we're snippy, and we're short, and we're irritable, and we don't even have, you know, the peace within ourselves. And just trying to get such a firm grip on it that no matter what happens, we're ready.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Do you remember that story that Andy Cantrell told when he did a gospel meeting for us about I don't remember if he called her name, but he was talking about Dana Mars. Was that the story about Dana? We were at FC with her. I was roommates with her brother. And she worked for NASA, right? Is that what? And she worked for NASA, and 9/11 happened, and everybody was, 9/11, and, you know, we all did it. And Dana was like, I mean, it's part of her personality anyway. But Dana was like, I'm a Christian. This is going to be all right. And that influenced other, like, people saw that.
Yeah.
In the midst of crisis, people see faith and God's peace. And I don't want to condemn or point fingers or anything about the last 3 months. But I'll just talk about my own self. I need to do better next time. I need to do better next time of showing a sense of God's peace and faith that He's got it under control and it's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels easy to say now, 3 months in.
Right.
You know, 2 months ago, it was really hard to say that.
It was.
I want to do better next time. Anyway, any comments before I do my last one? I'll do my last takeaway here, maybe.
Go ahead.
All right, Numbers chapter 6 is Aaron's blessing. In Numbers chapter 6 and verse 22, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus you shall bless the people of Israel, you shall say to them. So this is what God's representatives, right? Aaron and his sons are not just any old priest. These are the high priest. And these guys are God to the people. They represent God to the nation of Israel. And so God says, here's what I want you to say to my people. Mm-hmm. In verse 24, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So shall they put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them. So my first takeaway is just, I want to be a person at peace. And I want to be so much at peace that people can see that in me. God's peace. Mm-hmm. That's the second point. It's not a peace that comes from reading a self-help book or from paying $4 a month for a meditation app that helps me go to sleep at night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The peace that we're describing only comes from God. That's the reason why I read this Aaronic blessing that the priests give to the people of Israel. The peace belongs to God. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you, and implied, may the Lord give you peace. It's his peace. He owns it. He hands it out. You're not going to find it anywhere else in the world. It only comes from God, and God giving it on his terms, period.
Yeah.
And so that's why one of the major passages for this whole class has been Matthew chapter 11 and verses 28 through 30. This is called the Great Invitation, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden." That's the unrest that we're talking about in this world. You're having a hard time in life, you're having struggles, you're carrying a heavy burden on your shoulders. Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you, and I will give you rest." The point is it comes from him.
Mm-hmm.
Take my yoke upon you. It's not free. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. But here's the thing about Jesus' yoke. "For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so the last thing that I would say, before I just finish with one little quote here, is my 2 takeaways from 13 weeks of study. I want to do better about reflecting God's peace. I want to do better personally about understanding and sharing with other people that it is God's peace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I say this all the time with my work as a chaplain with officers. I've tried since I have been a Christian, in whatever spot in life I find myself. If you're having trouble, I've tried to work it out. Let's talk to a counselor. Let's pray together. Let's meditate, whatever it is. Let's read this self-help book, whatever. It doesn't work. It's never worked. Not once has it worked. It's God's rest, and the only way that we're going to give rest to the world is by giving God to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
You know, something that you said sort of made me reflect a little bit on my approach to the last 3 months of just finding our peace and rest in God and in Him alone. Because I think I can reflect back on moments where I was trying to read every article and gauge how dangerous COVID was for someone in my situation, and maybe even just try to if I can just figure out that it's not as risky as other people are saying it is, or if I can just read the news in this way, or if I can do this to take care of my health, I felt that pull to try to look for answers within myself, within within the facts given by just in any other place, and let that try to be a source of peace versus just saying, even being able to look at something that is scary and say, it's okay, God is in control, and just trying to learn to do that more.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be other things beyond this that are out of our control, that are challenging for all of us, for me, and just to say, God is still in control. And that was sort of my other point that I jotted down, is when we are distressed, when we are overwhelmed, cry out to the Lord. And so many times, we read in the Psalms, that was where we ended class, is just examples of people saying, I can't handle this, but you can, God.
That's good.
And even that was Jesus' rebuke of the disciples in the sea. Why didn't you have faith? Why didn't you just ask me in faith to take care of this? And I would have.
Yeah. So, since you're talking about this rest, faith, and trust, I wrote this down. You saw it in the notes, I'm sure. This is also from Les Miserables, describing our bishop here. And I won't read the whole quote, but the very top. This is what drew me to this thinking of this subject. It says, every night, this is a part of his daily routine. Every day, at the end of his day, he lays down in the grass and he looks up at the sky. And this is what it says. He was there alone with himself, collected, tranquil, adoring. This is the one that got me. I love this. Comparing the serenity of his heart with the serenity of the skies. So to think about looking at what God has done with the universe and how He's got it all under control, is what I'm looking at right now matching up with what's in my heart, or is there a storm of anxiety and tumult and all of this stuff? He's got it.
Yeah.
He's got it. It's under control. I promise.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
It is.
I got one more quote and then I'm done. Is anybody? I see that there's some other comments here.
There's some good stuff coming in from Steve that I'll share here. Thanks for your comments, Steve. He said, "The depth of peace we have from God is that He loves us and we can know whatever happens, it's for our good." James notes that trials bring us strength. The apostles rejoice that they were considered worthy to suffer, but even when we can't see any positive, it's there. God, the creator of the universe, in whom we live and breathe and have our being, loves me individually and uses His power for my good. If that's not peaceful, what is?
Yeah. That's, again, easy to say. Hard to put that into your heart.
Yeah.
Any other comments? We were going to finish up. We really might do a 30-minute one.
I think that's all right. One more from Steve here. He said, "I've always and still do struggle to really find my peace in God because He's given me circumstances that are pretty peaceful on their own."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how much worse is that?
Yeah.
You know, I always think about that. You know, the devil is good at what he does. Joseph was not tempted when he was a nearly dead prisoner in the bottom of a pit. He was tempted when he was the head of the household.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a good point.
David was not tempted when he was running for his life and living in caves. He was tempted when his kingdom was at ease and he was walking around on his roof not doing the work that he should have been doing. That's kind of like us. Like, most of our lives are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And the devil's really good at what he does. So there's no reason why he should be able to put unrest inside of us in most of our circumstances.
Yeah. And that for me is the big thing that I'm trying to think about as we wrap this, is just, what do I do the next time, and how am I more prepared now for the next thing that comes, based on these studies of peace, based on understanding God's ultimate control, based on just learning to cast my anxieties on Him. Because, you know, it doesn't take long to flip through the news and pick out what, you know, there might just be another wave of COVID. It might be something that we totally can't foresee. It might be, who knows. Won't waste my time speculating. But just thinking now about appreciating God's blessings, hiding myself in Him, being wrapped up in His peace, busy with His work, so that when that next thing comes, it's not going to shake me as much as this one did. And I think if we can continue on that progression, it's going to be helpful for us and help us attract other people.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, come on, I hope this is a once in a lifetime. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. For lots of folks, this has been a once in a lifetime. Think about this. If we made it through this one, we're going to handle the next one. Let's do better.
Yep.
Listen to this quote. I've been hanging on to this all class. I read this early on. It's from the Dictionary of the Old Testament. "Thus, the state of rest represents not only physical security and enjoyment, but also harmony with God, being in God's presence," we talked a lot about that, "and freedom from the threat of enemies and sin, because we trust Him, like even death doesn't trouble us." Mm-hmm. In sum, the notion of rest sums up all of God's promises and purposes. And so it seems to me like this has been 14 weeks well spent. Personally, for me, it has been.
Yeah.
It's been nice to think, you know, I at least once a week I come together, I study, I start thinking about this, and it's just like, all right, time to calibrate the old heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked where we ended sort of our new material last week, that we're looking forward to a better rest, the ultimate fulfillment of that rest, where nothing is going to come and shake us any longer.
All right. Any last ones? I think we're done.
Yeah, I think so.
If let me tell you, just because this may be the last time, I know that some people are watching who are not regular members of our congregation. At least I assume there are. Next Wednesday, we're going to restart Bible class at the building. And Dave Galloway is going to be teaching, and I think that he's going to be teaching 1st and 2nd Samuel, which are full. It's great history, but it's just jam-packed full of lessons. But here's the thing, and this is why I'm telling you. We're also going to be streaming in that situation. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be in my kitchen or my living room here, but we're going to be at the building. We're going to be streaming. So even if you don't get out, if you're part of our congregation and you don't get out, or if you're not part of our congregation, still join us next Wednesday At 7, Dave's going to do 1st and 2nd Samuel. And I don't know who it's going to be. I don't think that it's going to be this interactive where it's like hey, give us your comments on this. But somebody will be watching your comments.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you've got something that you want to say, Dave may not regularly say, hey, give me your comments to the camera, but we'll be watching it and somebody will be there ready to convey your comment to Dave so that we can at least interact in this way. So basically the same thing that we're doing here, just a different location, different teacher, different subject. Basically not what we're doing here.
Same source material.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you very much, everybody, for 14 weeks of encouragement and Bible study. Hopefully we're at the end of this run.
Thank you.